Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're going to be doing episode 18 of What We've Been Playing. This is a series where I just go over a couple of games that I've been really enjoying lately or just have been playing these last couple of weeks and want to explain some specific topics about them. In today's episode, we have 4 different games that we're going to be covering, and there's also going to be some questions for each of these that I'm curious as to what you think. If you have any answers to these questions, let me know down in the comments of the video. And if you have any questions or comments about any of the stuff that we talk about here, please let me know. If you're here live or afterwards, I'd love to hear anything that you have to say about these games. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the first game that I've been playing. The first game that I want to talk about here is Can't Stop. And Can't Stop is a very simple, classic Sid Saxon design where you are going to be rolling dice, trying to match up numbers and crawling up these different tracks. Now, the game itself, it has a bunch of different versions. You are going to basically pick and choose just the design or style you like. But the one that I played is a very classic one with this giant stop sign. And instead of cones, it had these little squares. And as you roll these dice, you're going to be moving up the different numbers. You're going to combine the dice into different pairs. As you can see, they go from 2 to 12, and the numbers that are harder to get are going to take less time to actually make it to the top. If you do make it to the top, you're going to close off that area, and nobody else that's playing can actually participate. And then if you get 3 of those areas full to the top, then you end up winning the whole game. Now, this game itself is fine. There's a couple of things that I have a problem with, but one main thing has to do with one small mechanism that the game uses, and that's the Yahtzee mechanism. You see this in a lot of different games where you have a set of dice, you roll them, and then it's up to you to think and decide if you want to re-roll those dice. A lot of times the Yahtzee style is you get maybe a couple of re-rolls, 3, but in Can't Stop's case, you actually can re-roll as much as you want until you do end up busting, and that's where the name of the game comes from, Can't Stop. But normally, I try to stay away from games that have the Yahtzee mechanism. And this goes to my question to you is what game has a mechanism that you generally dislike, but it has an exception where you do like it? In Can't Stop's case, I don't really like this mechanism. I think that it very much slows down this game that's supposed to be very quick and fast paced. The last time we played this, we played with 5 people, and we ended up just stopping after maybe 30, 45 minutes of playing this because it just wouldn't end. There was so much downtime. You were not getting to play. And that's, I think, the biggest problem I have with the Yahtzee mechanism is one person is rolling dice. They're rolling them. They are deciding if they want to continue. So it's a choice that only they are doing. Everybody else is just waiting. And then as soon as that person is done, the whole cycle repeats with the next player. They have that same choice. They're sitting there. There's a lot of mental math they're doing in the moment, trying to pair up different options. And there are options every single roll. So it's not one that I really enjoy. However, there is one game that I've played that really does this mechanism well. And that is a recent, I guess it's not very recent, the expansion is really recent, but this game in particular is The Reckoners. The Reckoners does the same thing here with the Yahtzee mechanism. However, it solves it by having the Yahtzee mechanism simultaneous and cooperative. So not only are you all rolling the dice together, but based on what you're rolling here, you're also going to be communicating and talking to the other players at the table and saying, hey, I have this symbol. Do you want me to go and try to find this other symbol? And everybody is really stressed out about what they're taking and what they're holding on to. But the fact that you're all doing it at the same time eliminates that downtime issue that I really don't like with this mechanism in general. And it also has that cooperation, coordination, and investment in what other people are doing. So I think that The Reckoners does a great job at solving this issue for me personally, and I think that overall this game is one that I would much prefer playing instead of something. Even though it's supposed to be a quick game, Can't Stop, it ends up taking a lot longer than it really should, and I think that that mechanism is going to add to a lot of downtime in the game. So not a big fan of Can't Stop. I do think it's pretty bearable at 2 players because you are just going back and forth, but if you're looking for a game that has that dice rolling and that do I stay or do I go mechanism, I do recommend that you check out The Reckoners. So that's the first game that I've been playing. Let's go ahead and move on to the second game. It's good to see that we have some live viewers here. If you have any comments or questions or concerns about anything that I'm talking about here, let me know down in the comments below. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is one that I actually just wrapped up playing, and this is going to be Maracaibo. Maracaibo is one of my favorite games ever, and it still is. The place held up super well, but one thing that I wanted to explore had to do with the solo mode of the game. Now, Now, Maracaibo is a game where you play as some pirates in the Caribbean. You're going to be moving around your different ship, getting upgrades, recruiting people to help you out, and then going around and just getting points in a variety of ways. It's an evolving game. It has a narrative story that's you're going to be following, adding new cards and new pieces to the map. And I think this is just an incredible system overall. Now, in the original base box, it has a solo mode called Gene. And Gene here is essentially an AI opponent that has a ship. They move around the map, and they are going to be competing for all of the different aspects of the game, whether it be the fighting, whether it be the questing. They are going to be moving around, and there's a bit of upkeep on the turns, but it's not very convoluted. You flip over one of these cards down here, it'll tell you the movement of their ship, and the pace of the game is dictated based on these cards and how fast that character is moving. And Gene is pretty dang fast, so you're going to want to catch up, and you want to make sure that you're getting your actions done as efficiently as possible, because that game board is so small, and Gene is not necessarily putting out assistance or anything like that she's going to be stopping at. So the board is very small for her, where it is going to be expanding and growing for you. And that was honestly, the biggest thing that I dislike about Maracaibo was if you played that solo mode, you were stuck on that specific path where you needed to have a very quick game. However, the new expansion, the Uprising here, adds a new solo mode to the game, and I think this is really, really cool. So the Uprising is, in general, one of my favorite expansions ever. I think it's incredible. It adds some updated components with recessed player boards. It has new story that adds a lot of really interesting mechanisms, customizable player boards with these different tiles that actually pop out. It's amazing. However, this actually completely replaced one of the modes in the game, that solo mode, and this goes to my question here. What games have you encountered that completely replace modes of the game or give you multiple options? And I think that's what Maracaibo the Uprising does. I don't think that the new solo mode necessarily replaces the old one, but I think it just gives you a new option if you want something that has a lot less maintenance. And I think that's going to be really key for a lot of people who enjoy solo gaming, is this game itself. Now the maintenance for the solo mode for Gene is almost nothing. This new Jacques solo mode, it tackles it a bit of a different way. So let me pull up the rules here for you and just show you some of the icons that will appear. So instead of having that deck of cards and moving anything, you're only actually going to use two pieces for your opponent. And this piece is the scoring marker as well as the exploration marker. And you can even use this solo mode in a competitive variant just to add some more competition and maybe another goal or some different people that are going to be blocking different spaces. So I really like that you have some flexibility with this solo mode as well. But the cards themselves, instead of moving pieces, all you're going to be doing is just blocking stuff. And it's so straightforward and simple on how it works. You're just going to draw a card, and based on the number of the card that it is, that's the action that you take. And so you have effects like just put a disc over a city, or you can move a character on the exploration track, or maybe it'll take a quest from a specific spot. It's all based on when that character comes. And you can choose a difficulty level, which will add more difficult or more challenging cards to it. So I really like this approach where it retains that feel of the original, where you have a character that is going to be blocking spaces, but there's no extra steps. You're not going to be putting the spaces, you're not going to be moving a ship, you're not going to have to track a lot of things. It's just do the action and it's finished. It's very easy to run. And I think it's going to be a great option for people that liked the game of Maracaibo in general, or were curious and want something that has a bit less setup and a less invasive of a solo mode. However, I do think that the original has some things that this one is lacking. For example, with the original Gene solo mode, it actually is going to fight. It's going to put out cubes. It's going to contest some of the different areas. And I think it's a big deal because it actually acts like a player, as opposed to this new one that is more of just blocking. And I think that's a pretty significant deal, because if you're looking for somebody that you are actually going to be competing on multiple levels, I actually think the original solo mode might be the way to go, especially if you're very familiar with the Maracaibo base game. I think that you can move from this new Jacques to back to Gene and have an excellent time playing on those higher difficulties after you've learned some of the systems and maybe are looking for something that's a bit more interactive, a bit more challenging. So I do really like this new solo mode. I think it's more accessible in general, but I do think it loses some of that interaction that the original Gene had. But overall, very impressed with this new solo mode. I think it's a great option, and I'm probably going to be playing back and forth on either of them based on the different experience that I want to explore. But just finished playing a game of this, and it's wonderful. I can't recommend this expansion enough. I think the Uprising is one of the best expansions, period. I think it's just more Maracaibo, more story, more cards, and the coolest thing are just the new interesting mechanisms that are going to be added based on those new player cards, or I guess not the player cards, but the white-backed cards. Sorry about that. But the white back cards just have so many cool effects. And a lot of them were actually fan made. So there's even names of the people who created them on the cards themselves. And so when you see one, you're like, oh my gosh, no wonder this got in the game because it's so interesting. So very impressed with Maracaibo. And yeah, I'm curious to hear what games that you've encountered that have completely replaced the modes of the game. Up next, we have another game here that I really, really enjoy. And this is Keyflower. So Keyflower is just like Maracaibo, another 10 out of 10 game for me. And there's a lot of reasons why. I'm going to touch quickly on just some of the things that I think really make it stand out. But Keyflower itself, if you're not familiar, is a worker placement game where you have workers of different colors and you use them in two main different ways. The first way that you use them is you put them around tiles to auction for them, or you can place them on top of the tiles to actually use the action. However, if you are using an action, if it's one in the middle, whoever wins that tile gets all of the workers that were used for it. And then if it's in front of you at the end of the round, you get to take all of those things. Another thing that I really enjoy has to do with the winter scoring tiles. Each round you put out tiles on the board, but in the final round, every player starts with these winter tiles, and it's up to the players to determine which tiles go into the center. And you could pick 1 to 3 or however many you have, and you're going to populate the middle with it. So you have some idea of what endgame scoring is going to occur in the game. So it's up to you to prepare for this endgame scoring, or you can plan or watch what other people are doing and try to anticipate what endgame scoring tiles they may have. The expansions just add to this intrigue and trying to figure out what's going on. And I love this. I think it's amazing the fact that you have so much control. You have that long-term strategy from turn 1, and you can choose to do 1 or all 3 of those tiles, or you can completely ignore them and focus on whatever your opponents are doing and trying to thwart their plans. I love this system, but one thing that I want to talk about in particular has to do with the I'm taking your stuff or using your stuff mechanism that appears in Keyflower. Now, I alluded to this earlier with the idea that you can use tiles, and if you're using somebody else's tile, or if you're winning a tile with meeples on it, you get all those meeples. This is one of my favorite parts about the game, is the fact that every single tile is available every single turn. When it's your turn, you only get to do one thing, and it's a game where you want to do everything. And if you use a tile, you place a worker on there. If it's empty, you do the action. You can use anybody's tile. If you put a worker on a tile, though, that color of that action becomes locked, and the next person who goes there has to put more meeples than were already put on there. So if I put a blue, you've got to put 2 or maybe 3 blues on it next to activate that same action. Now, this is a great mechanism because not only is it allowing this interaction between the players, but it's also making it so you have to prioritize using your own things or using other people's things, but at a cost. If you end up using an opponent's thing, you're going to be able to use it at a cheaper cost immediately, but at the other round, they get those pieces back behind their shield to use for further plays in the future. So you're giving them more actions later or potentially more scoring at the end of the game. And I love this system because you are just looking at all of your different options, and even owning a specific tile might not mean that you get to use that. I love that. And there's even this color of meeple in the game, this green here, that's a bit harder to get, and you're not really going to be able to use tiles multiple times. And you can lock out specific characters' tiles by just placing a single green meeple on it, and you've essentially stopped that action from being used. And I love this. I think that Keyflower does the I'm using or taking your stuff action really well. And this is going to lead me to my next question. What games do you love that have an I'm using or taking your stuff mechanism, and which do it the best? Another game that I can think of that uses this really well is Trois. And Trois is a system of dice addition and division, where you're going to be adding up all of these dice values to take different actions at different power levels. And the main driving factor of this has to do with the dice in all of the different depots. Based on the amount of meeples that you have in these different areas, then you are going to put all these dice in your own personal depot. But when you're taking your turn, you can use dice from everybody's depot. Now, the cost to this is you have to pay the other players based on the dice you're taking and how many dice you're taking. And so taking these high dice, it suddenly becomes very cheap if you're only taking 1 or 2, but if you're taking a whole bunch at the same time, then it could be very costly, which is cool because the economy is going to move around, and it really stresses the importance of that money resource. I love this system. Another really cool benefit that this system has is if you're rolling low numbers on your dice, then other players are not going to want to use them. So it gives you some control and modulation on your own turn when you can use these bonus actions where maybe you flip your bad dice or re-roll your dice. There's some great choices when it comes to utilizing low-cost dice, or even turning high dice into low dice just to prevent other players from actually wanting to use them, lowering that incentive to use your things. I love this I'm using or you taking your stuff mechanism, and I think that Trois does it as well, very well. So Keyflower is an incredible game, and I'm curious, what games do you love that have an I'm using or I'm taking your stuff mechanism? So that is our third game, and that brings us to the last game that I want to talk about today, one that just arrived from Mayday Games, and I've been having so much fun just learning about it and discovering it. It's a game that I played a very long time ago. This is Crokinole. My friends Jeremy and Bryce, they originally were the ones who taught me how to play this game. I had a great time. So I was looking for a really cool, cost-effective option that still looked great. But Crokinole, the Mayday boards from Crokinole are very cost-effective, and the Kickstarter for the Mahogany version just arrived. Now, if you're unfamiliar, Crokinole is a dexterity game here where you are flicking these discs into this central area, and you're trying to make it into the center of the board, or if there's already stuff on the board, you have to hit an opponent's piece before you can actually leave it in a scoring area. At the end of the round, based on where these pieces are, you are going to score points. If it's closest to the middle, you're going to score more points. If it's in the outside, you're going to score less. And it's a first to 100, and it's an awesome, tense experience as you are flicking these discs, trying to get them, and based on the position of your opponent's discs, you can set up walls to protect your things that are towards the center because they'll score more points. You can try to ricochet off of the different areas because all you have to do is hit an opponent's disc at least once. So if you are able to ricochet your own piece into another, and that can move certain things around, you can set up these awesome plays and combos. It actually reminds me, when I was living in Hawaii, I taught a bocce ball league for Unified Sports, and bocce ball had a lot of this positioning as well, where you would throw these balls in specific places and just have them sit there, and these balls would serve as walls, and there were some really cool strategic placements of the different pieces. And Crokinole reminds me of that a lot. Crokinole reminds me of a very classic game, something like shuffleboard, a lifetime sport. And I think that this is a great option for a dexterity game like this. And it's a great thing to just come around. But the thing that I want to talk about today in particular has to do with just the amount of extraness that this game involves. So my question to you is, what is the most extra board game that you've played recently, and why? Now, what do I mean by this? Now, extra is something that involves a lot and asks a lot of the players to actually do or use. Now, some things are extra just for being exorbitant or extravagant. Like we have a framed copy of Micro Macro Crime City. That's pretty extra because we had to go to that extra effort to frame it, hang it on the wall just to have it prepared. But I do think it looks pretty cool afterwards. But in this case, Crokinole, I believe, is a super extra game because it has so much prep that's involved to actually get to use it or get to run it. And in particular, you have to wax your Crokinole board before you start playing it because you are going to smooth that surface out so that your discs fly very well. And on the emails for the Kickstarter, they essentially were like, hey, go get this wax. This is what we use and try it out. And there are even videos that you can find online that I actually had to research how to wax my Crokinole board. And it's so funny. It feels like this big homework assignment for a game. And I'm not a big fan of that. There's a lot of role-playing games that I stay away from because I don't really want to spend a lot of time researching and figuring this out. The Crokinole board also has that same amount of homework where you have to go and you have to figure out all of these small little things. And so there's little tips and tricks. I really like these videos here. There's a series by Tracy Boards that they tell you how to wax your Crokinole board, and they're also going to give you lots of little tips and tricks. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find these videos yourselves. But I thought it was really interesting how much you just need to know to be able to do things well and prep the game to have a best experience for others. So I'm glad I've done it. I think that this game is going to be a mainstay in a lot of game nights to come. I think it'll be a very neat experience. Just the fact that you have this big presence, and when things are sliding well, I think people are going to be very excited to play it. But I think this is hilarious how extra Crokinole boards are and just how that's accepted in the community. So if you are curious to try Crokinole, keep in mind that you will probably need something like wax or things to keep it lubed. There's even this gliss powder that you can use on the discs to help them slide as well. And Mayday Games sells some. It's almost like chalking your pool cue if you're playing billiards. It's pretty hilarious. So some good things to think about. Now, we've actually done a video on the channel all about extra board games. And so I'm curious to see if you have any overlap with ours, but there's so many different games that go above and beyond with what they're offering. But we've done a lot of of insight, not insight, but a lot of content just about these extra board games in general. So I'm curious to hear what you have for
Howdy, this
extra
is
board games, and just want to know what's really made you work for it before you've actually gotten to play the game. So we've got a huge list of 10, but the one that comes to my mind that I always think about, we have a case that's dedicated for it, is Kingdom Death Monster. This is a miniatures game where you are boss battling in this super grim dark setting. You control this settlement of survivors and you send them out to go on hunts, and these hunts are these giant creatures. You're going to skin them alive for the different resources, create weapons and items, and then bring them back to your settlement and innovate and create a better society overall. But to actually play Kingdom Death Monster, you have to do some modeling, and I've never modeled before I ever played this game, but I thought the gameplay looked so compelling and so interesting, and it is, thankfully, that I went to the whole sprue route. I've cut these things and created these different miniatures. I think it's much easier than doing something like painting. I will make these sprues, but I will not paint miniatures anymore. I've tried my hand at that, and I think that the miniature assembly is much easier. You're just essentially making a model kit. You're gluing things together. Still not something I really enjoy, but I think the gameplay is pretty dang amazing, and the models do look awesome when they're finished here. But Kingdom Death Monster is definitely an extra board game with lots of prep time. I'm curious, what games do you have in your collections that are super extra in the fact that you just have to do so much just to get them to the table? So curious to hear what you have to say and what games that you have been playing that are super extra recently. So that's it. Those are the games that we've been playing these last few weeks. And sorry, I haven't been posting very often. I actually got sick recently, and I'm recovering from that. But I do have my entire list here for you of all of the board games that I've been playing. So I'll quickly go ahead and list all of those. And if you have any questions or comments about anything that I talked about here, please let me know down below. But here's the whole list: Burncycle, Hallertau, Quacks of Quedlinburg, Scout, Marvel Champions, Beyond the Sun, Can't Stop, Good Critters, Glass Road, Role Player Adventures, Tokyo Tsukiji Market, Unmatched Battle of Legends, Capital X2, Generations, Biblios, Wonderland's War, Similo, Viticulture World, Picnic, Pictures, Skull, Mysterium, Terraforming Mars, New York Zoo, Veiled Fate, Sheepy Time, Summoner Wars 2nd Edition, Cthulhu Death May Die, Azul, Strike, The Lord of the Rings, The Card Game, Hadrian's Wall, Fields of Arl, Port Royal, Fugitive, Roll for the Galaxy, Vagrant Song, Midara, Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood of Venice, Anne's End Legacy, Rove, Keyflower, Three Sisters, Vabank, Dune, Hail Hydra, Arkham Horror, The Card Game, Crokinole, Noosefjord, Planet Unknown, Clans of Caledonia, and Maracaibo. So lots of games played in these last couple of weeks. Luckily, I wasn't completely debilitated while sick, but had to make sure I isolated myself to not spread the infection. So did get to play a lot of games while I was sick, but there was a week where I was totally out. But lots of fun stuff. Finished a couple of campaign games, finished a lot of different scenarios for these different LCGs. I'm in the middle of a Arkham campaign right now. We're doing Dream Eaters, the Dream Side. So having a lot of fun with that. And if you have any questions about any of the games that I talked about here, please let me know down in the comments below. I'll leave the stream up for a little bit if you have any questions or comments before I close it. But overall, I've been having an excellent time with games, and I'm excited to just play more. So let me get some water really quick. If you have any questions, let me know here. If you're live or later, please let me know down in the comments. And before I close off, I'll go ahead and just list a couple of games that I'm excited to play. And so first off, we have recently got in Blood on the Clocktower, and we're doing a side game community day here in a little bit, where we're going to hopefully have a lot of people opening up to the Colorado Springs community. And I'm excited to just play so many of these big games. We'll have maybe 3 different gaming tables going on at once, and hopefully be able to bring people together for these large games as well. So I'm excited to see if Blood on the Clocktower shows that it's the best social deduction game that many people do tout. And I think that there are going to be some good people in here that will make for an interesting experience. So unfortunately, I probably won't get to play, as I will most likely be the narrator, but I hope that it's a good time for everybody that's involved. But the production looks awesome, and I'm excited to try it out and see what that experience is like. Another game that I'm excited to try I think that I just want to play more. Honestly, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice is a game that I've been enjoying so much. I have a video coming out very soon. It's in the middle of processing right now. That is the best games of 2022 so far. And I know that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice is not super. It's not a 22 game. It's a 2021 game. But the fact that it exists is actually decreasing my rating of a lot of other games that are in a similar vein. And I've just been enjoying it so much. Finished the entire first campaign, and I've started working on the Tokyo expansion. And there's some great crossover, and you can see how they're taking the ideas from the video games where you have the two different timelines coinciding at once. It's not quite a 10, but I do actually have it. I bumped it from an 8 to a 9 because I do think the game is that much fun. It's so easy to play, but the decisions are very impactful and important, and I'm having so much fun with it. There are a couple of scenarios that are ridiculously easy, and that's why it's not quite at the 10, because sometimes you set up a scenario and it's over like that because it was just so simple. But I do think overall the system itself is incredible. I'm always excited to play more. And right now I'm at this very challenging part where I'm not going to get any spoilers, but it's very hard and I've lost 4 times in a row. You're only supposed to play twice in the campaign version, but I've been having so much fun that I want to beat this because it is that significant challenge. I want to see how I can overcome these obstacles. A great puzzle system, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. Hopefully I get to play more of that. And that's it so far. I'll go ahead and close off now. Once again, excited to hear your answers to these questions. And it's good to be back here. My voice is obviously not up to super par. I've had to take some big water breaks and a little coffee here and there. But thank you for bearing with me and for being here live. I appreciate it. And I'm just curious to hear what you think about these games, these questions I've asked. And in general, thank you so much for the continuous support. So I'm Mackenzie Franklin, and thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.